John Gotti. The Gambino family had for decades been one of the most public and most violent of Mafia families. It was one of the original 5 families of New York and for decades was the most powerful and profitable of them all. You see, John Gotti took control of the most powerful of New York's 5 families by the old-fashioned mob method of assassinating his predecessor. Gotti ordered the murder of the previous boss, Paul Castellano, in 1985. Castellano had been appointed acting boss of the family by the aging Carlo Gambino in 1975. Gambino had moved into the family top spot in 1957 after arranging the murder of his predecessor, Albert Anastasia. Anastasia in turn had been elevated to boss after his predecessor, Vincent Mangano, disappeared and was presumed murdered in 1951. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the life and criminal exploits of John Gotti, an American gangster and boss of the Gambino crime family of New York City. Early life. Gotti was born on October 27, 1940 in the South Bronx, New York. Mother Fanny and father J. Joseph Gotti were both Italian immigrants. Gotti was the 5th of 13 children in a family whose only income came from their father's unpredictable work as a day laborer. Gotti and his family moved frequently before settling in East New York, an area known at the time for its gang activity. By just the age of 12, Gotti was working as an errand boy for an underground club in the neighborhood run by Carmine Fatico. Fatico was a captain in the local Gambino family, the largest of the 5 organized crime families in New York City. Through his activities with the club, Gotti met Agnello della Croce, who became his lifelong mentor. Gotti soon became the leader of a gang called the Fulton Rockaway Boys, a group known for their frequent robberies and carjackings. At age 14, Gotti's toes were crushed as he tried to steal a cement mixer. The accident gave the mobster to be his trademark gait and earned him another incident on his list of petty crimes. He was considered a bully and constant discipline problem at Franklin K. Lane High School until he dropped out at age 16. By 18, the police department ranked Gotti as a low-level associate in the Fatico crew. Between 1957 and 1961, Gotti pursued a life of crime on a full-time basis. His arrest record included street fighting, public intoxication, and car theft. By his 21st birthday, Gotti had been arrested 5 times, but served little jail time. On March 6, 1962, Gotti married 17-year-old Victoria Di Giorgio. At the time of their marriage, Di Giorgio had already given birth to their first child, Angela, and was pregnant with their second. In the early years of their marriage, the couple fought constantly and separated numerous times. Gotti briefly tried his hand at legitimate jobs for the sake of his family, first as a presser in a coat factory and then as an assistant to a truck driver. Criminal exploits. His crime-free life was brief, however, and Gotti was jailed twice by 1966. When he and his family made the move to Ozone Park in Queens, New York, the budding criminal quickly became a major player in the Gambino hijacking crew. In 1968, Gotti served his first major sentence when the FBI charged he and his 2 accomplices with committing cargo thefts near John F. Kennedy Airport. All 3 men were convicted of hijacking and sentenced to 3 years in prison. While Gotti served his time, the Fatico crew moved from East New York to a storefront near Gotti's home in Queens. The group's headquarters was disguised as a non-profit organization called the Virgin Hunt and Fish Club. After his release from prison in 1971, Gotti was designated as the temporary leader of Fatico's gang, while the captain faced loan sharking charges. First murder, Jimmy McBratney. In May of 1973, while Gotti was captain of Fatico's crew, he committed his first murder, the shooting death of Jimmy McBratney, a rival gang member who kidnapped and murdered a member of the Gambino family. Gotti was sent to exact revenge, but he was less than discreet, leaving multiple witnesses at the scene of the crime. Gotti was arrested in 1974 after several bystanders identified him in a photo lineup. At his trial 3 years later, Gotti cut a deal with the court. In return for a plea of attempted manslaughter, he served only 4 years in prison. In 1976, the head of the Gambino family, Carlo Gambino, died. Gambino chose to leave his brother-in-law, Paul Castellano, in charge of the family. In a gesture of goodwill, Castellano allowed Della Croce to remain the family's underboss, giving him control over 10 of the 23 Gambino crews. When Gotti returned from prison in 1977, Della Croce promoted the mobster to captain of the Belgian crew. Death of Frank Gotti. In March of 1980, personal tragedy hit the Gotti family when the neighbor John Favara hit 12-year-old Frank Gotti with his car after the boy steered his bike into traffic. The death was ruled accidental, but witnesses say that Di Giorgio later attacked Favara with a metal baseball bat, sending him to the hospital. Favara decided not to press charges. According to witnesses, Favara endured 4 months of death threats until July 28, 1980, the day he was clubbed over the head and shoved into a van. His body was never found. Gotti and his family were on vacation in Florida at the time of their neighbor's disappearance and denied any knowledge of his whereabouts. The Teflon Don. In 1985, the FBI had gathered enough evidence to place Gotti and Della Croce under federal indictments for racketeering. Other associates were indicted on heroin trafficking charges. The drug charges infuriated Castellano, who punished illegal drug dealing with the penalty of death. As captain, Gotti knew he would be held responsible for the transgressions of his crew. To smooth over the situation with Castellano, Gotti asked Della Croce to speak to the boss on his behalf. But before an understanding could be reached, Della Croce died of cancer. All goodwill between Castellano and Gotti dissolved when the boss didn't attend Della Croce's funeral. Gotti saw the behavior as disrespectful and, accordingly to later testimony, he decided to take action. 2 weeks later, on December 16, 1985, Castellano was gunned down while eating at a Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. Gotti was made boss soon after. By August of 1986, John Gotti had become something of a local hero and icon in his Howard Beach neighborhood. When it was time to face trial for the racketeering charges, Gotti and the other defendants were acquitted for their crimes. FBI officials later discovered that the jury foreman fixed the verdict. It was a crushing defeat for law enforcement officials, and Gotti became the mob's symbol of invincibility, earning the name Teflon Don because charges against him just wouldn't stick. Imprisonment and death. Now a recognizable figure around New York City due to his headline-grabbing acquittals and penchant for impeccable suits and daily haircuts, Gotti was once reportedly asked if he disliked being referred to as the Dapper Don. "No, this is my public," he said. "They love me." It was even rumored he kept his spare suit available to change into during lunch recesses at his trials. Such a recognizable and public figure, his whereabouts were easily followed. By the late 1980s, the FBI had installed eavesdropping equipment in an apartment above the social club Gotti frequented, recording conversations implicating him, Gravano, and family consigliere Frank Locascio. Gotti was arrested in December 1990. Not only did authorities have the tape recordings, but they had Gravano, who had made a deal to flip and testify for the prosecution. The trial was a media sensation, with around 1,000 supporters gathered outside the courthouse at various times in support of Gotti. By this time, Gotti would not avoid a guilty verdict. He was convicted on all 13 counts against him, including federal charges of loan sharking, racketeering, multiple murders, jury tampering, and gambling. Gotti was sentenced to life imprisonment, while informant Gravano received a 5-year sentence. On the day of his conviction, James Fox, head of New York FBI office, said, "The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered in Velcro, and all the charges stuck." This verdict had great symbolic importance. Rudolph Giuliani, former U.S. attorney for Manhattan, said of the verdict, "You can't say, like Gotti did, 'I am going to break the law and kill people and the hell with all of you.' That is a challenge that lawful authority cannot ignore." He was obsessed with his own importance, Mauve said following the conviction. He was convinced that no jury would ever convict him because he was John Gotti, a Caesar, an emperor. The self-styled emperor spent half his 7 years as head of the Gambino family in jail awaiting trial, the rest trying to avoid prosecution. In prison from 1992 to 2000, Gotti was kept in virtually solitary confinement. In 1998, he was operated on for neck and head cancer that would ultimately claim his life. Gotti died on June 10, 2002 at the Federal Prison Hospital at Springfield, MO. He was 61 years old at the time of his death. In death as in life, Gotti's funeral was big and bold. 22 black limousines, 19 flower cars, and hundreds of private vehicles crowded the streets of Ozone Park, Howard Beach, and sections of Queens, alongside his son Frank Gotti, who was interred at St. John Cemetery, a graveyard that is the final resting place of many a noted New York mobster, though none perhaps as famous as the Dapper Don. At the time of his conviction in 1992, Gotti named his eldest son, John A. Gotti, known as Junior, the acting boss of the Gambino family. Between 2004 and 2009, Gotti Jr. was a defendant in 4 racketeering trials, all ending in mistrials. But for Gotti Jr., following in his father's footsteps was not a cause he ultimately wished to continue pursuing. Unfortunately, when you hear the name Gotti, it's become metaphoric for an organized crime with the streets. Gotti Jr. says in the biography document, in which he explains his decisions to leave the Mafia life behind, "I don't see any way you could extricate yourself from this. I don't see any way it could be done. As hard as I try, it's extremely difficult." John Gotti elevated the public's notion of a mob boss to near mythic status. As head of the Gambino crime family in the late 1980s and early 1990s, he got a colorful and extremely public figure, not just in New York City, but across the nation. In a separate video, we discuss how Gotti's son was made boss of the Gambino family after his father's demise, and how Junior managed to follow in the footsteps of his father.
Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more videos on crime stories, notorious outlaws, and historical scandals.